Welcome to Community Bible Church's Kids Class. Community Bible Church thanks Bible Visuals International for the use of this visual story. And now for this week's episode of Salvador of Spain. Of all the neighborhoods in Madrid, the capital of Spain, St. Blas, was one of the roughest. Anyone who wanted to find drugs or get into trouble could be sure to do so in St. Blas. It was 9:30 in the morning in St. Blas. A thin, black-haired boy ambled past the row of houses that lined the busy street. He ducked between women heading to market and children hurrying to school. When he arrived at the corner, he looked both ways as if to make sure no one was watching. Then he dashed across the street and down an alley. Ahead was a large abandoned factory building with broken windows and a door that hadn't been painted for years. He grabbed the doorknob and pushed the door open. It was cool and dark inside. "Hey, Salva, you made it!" Salva waited till his eyes adjusted to the darkness, and he could see Victor, a friend from school. "It wasn't so hard getting here, was it?" Salvador shook his head. "I just left for school like I always do, and when I got close, I went down a different street. Nobody even noticed." "Well, you'll have a good time today. Firecrackers sound awesome in here." Salva grinned. Yes, setting off firecrackers would sound great in here. For a moment, Salva thought of his schoolroom and the 100 kids in his class. Would the teacher notice he was absent? He usually tried hard to please his teacher and didn't want to think what would happen if the teacher called on him and he wasn't there to answer. Well, he wouldn't have his hand smacked or his hair pulled by the teacher today. But what if his mother found out? She would only scream at him, as she seemed to do all the time, now that there were so many children in the tiny house. Although Salvador really wanted to please his mother, today he just didn't care. At 10 years old, he had just skipped school for the first time. Today was going to be a good day. Salva used to care about things when he was little. He could remember waiting for his dad to come home late at night. Jesus Miguez worked long hours in a factory an hour away. Sometimes Salva never saw him for several days. But some evenings, Salva waited outside their front door with a soccer ball in hand, eyes fixed firmly on the end of the street. What fun it was to race to meet Dad, then walk beside him the rest of the way home, matching his own little steps to his father's big ones. And then they would play soccer in the street. Sometimes Salva's 2 older brothers played against him and his dad. Sometimes all 3 boys played against Dad. What fun they had! Salva couldn't remember when things had started to change. Because of working longer and longer hours, his dad had begun coming home later and later. "Salva, I'm sorry, I can't play soccer with you tonight. I'm just too tired," his father said many times now. Salva's disappointment was great, but he knew that without his father working so long, there just wouldn't be enough money to feed 7 children. With Dad away so much, his mom had to take care of him and his 5 brothers and 1 sister. Sometimes they fought, and his mother would scream to make herself heard and to stop the fighting. She always seemed tired. Salva knew He and his brothers were partly to blame. They did fight a lot. He could remember the day his older brother, Jose, wouldn't stop hitting him. Salva punched and kicked and yelled between blows. Jose, you stop or I'll. Salva pursed his lips and spat. Saliva ran down his cheek. Mom! Jose had yelled. The next thing Salva knew was a jolt of pain in the back of his head and the crash of splintering glass. Salva, his mother yelled, shaking the rest of the broken glass in her hand. Never spit on anyone. And both of you stop fighting. If you would help me with the work, you wouldn't be causing so much trouble. Salva had looked down at the floor. He knew he shouldn't be fighting, and he should help with work. But no other boys in his neighborhood helped at home. All the boys on his street played soccer. They played so often that many were really good, maybe even good enough to be on a professional team one day. Salva dreamed of that, but even the most exciting game of soccer couldn't take away the thoughts he sometimes had at night, after everyone was in bed and the house was quiet. The ache of missing the times he used to spend with his dad, the hurt that came from being yelled at, even though he deserved it, and the heavy feeling knowing that some of the things he had done that day were wrong and that he couldn't go back and start the day over again, were jumbled together in his mind. Sometimes Salva thought about what the priest had said. The black-robed priest who taught religion class at school said that you must pay for the things you've done wrong. God keeps a list, the priest had said. He knows all the things you have done today and every day. Each week you must come to church to confess and tell me the wrong things you have done. I will then tell you what God expects you to do to pay for them. Salva had squirmed in his seat. He looked at Victor beside him and the manual in front of him. He did not want to talk to anyone, not even his best friend, about saying mean things, about spitting, about lying, about fooling around, about not helping his mother. Salva had slid in his seat and folded his arms across his chest. The memory of the only time he had gone to confession popped into his mind. The priest had gotten angry with him that day. Salva could still hear the sharp words, "Salvador, pay attention! What's the matter with you?" And then the priest had hit him on the back of the head. Salva unconsciously rubbed his head as if feeling the pain all over again. His parents could go to church, but Salva would never go again. But Salvador forgot all about school and the priest and his family, and the day he skipped school. He had firecrackers, friends, and a whole day to do as he pleased. "Hey, Victor," he called, "will you let me light the next one?" Salva lit the firecracker and jumped back before it exploded with a tremendous echoing boom. What a day this is going to be, he thought, and it was a perfect day because no one, neither his teachers nor his parents, noticed that he did not go to school. Wow, Salva thought, I'll have to do this again. A few days later, Salva sat in religion class at school, listening to the priest talk about special people who had become outstandingly good when they were alive. "We call these people saints," he said, "and it could be that if you are extra careful to go to confession, to pay for your sins, to give money to the church and to pray, one of you will become a saint and have a statue made of you like the ones in St. Matthew and St. Anna in our church." Salva looked sideways at Victor, seated beside him, and the corners of their mouth turned up. In his mind, he could see a statue of him and Victor perched high above the people's heads in church as they recite, "Our Father which art in heaven." Salva wanted to snicker, but he pulled his lips together just before the priest stared hard at him. But the picture of him and Victor stayed. Salva looked down at his thin arms, his red shirt, his black pants, his ragged sneakers. In his mind, they were turning into smooth white marble. What would it feel like to be made out of marble? Cold and stiff, never able to change position? Thump! Salva did not see the hand swinging toward the back of his head, but he did feel the pain. "Salvador, pay attention!" the priest scolded angrily. Salva's face grew red. Everyone in the class stared at him. Salva scowled at the priest, who stalked toward the front of the room. He might have expected his mother or another one of his teachers to hit him on the back of the head. The priest was supposed to be the closest to God than anyone else, and this was the second time he had been struck by a priest. Salva fixed his eyes on the priest's face, but inside he was not listening. If that's how God is going to treat me, he thought, then I don't need him. The next 3 years, Salva went to school less and less, although he always left home as if he were going to school, and returned at the right time in the afternoon. Salva and his friends formed a gang. One day, one of the boys brought cigarettes he had stolen from his parents. Some of the boys snatched the cigarettes and lit them quickly. Salva watched the smoke curl toward the ceiling of the abandoned factory before he lit his first cigarette. Salva's first puff almost choked him. The taste was bitter, and the smoke burned his throat. But to prove that he was tough, he kept puffing on the cigarette. The next day, smoking was a little easier, and in a week, Salvador was smoking without even thinking what he was doing. Once or twice he thought of his parents and how upset they would be if they found out about his smoking and how they stole cigarettes from parked cars. "Salvador, we don't want you to smoke cigarettes like the other boys in the neighborhood. Smoking will harm your lungs." But Salvador's parents were too busy to notice. Besides, Salvador thought, my friends accept me when I smoke, so what else matters? When Salvador was 13, he dropped out of school. "Most of my friends have stopped going to school," Salvador defended himself to his parents. "I've already gone through 8 grades. That's enough school for me." One day, not too long after Salva dropped out of school, he returned from spending the day with the gang. He shoved open the door. Someone was clanging pans and crinkling paper. Salva, curious, walked to the kitchen. "Mom, what are you doing?" he cried in alarm. He watched her pack the pans in a box, then looked around the room. The cupboard was empty. "Where are our dishes?" "They're packed, Salva. We're moving. Your father found a bigger apartment in Casalada. It's only 10 miles away." "Moving?" Salva screamed. "We can't move. All my friends are here." And that's where we're going to stop our story for this week. Thank you to the talented writers and artists of Bible Visuals International. Please come back next week for the second part of Salvador of Spain.